Thank you, Nick. And it's been traveling with people like Nick from the beginning of the journey that have kept me and us on the road. It's all about partnerships. All the way, it's always about partnerships. So thank you to Capstone. There were days in the early days when literally we didn't know whether we would get on the plane to Malawi in 2 days' time because we hadn't got a penny to even buy an air ticket. And Capstone would put up their hand and say, get the ticket, we'll pay. So I will never forget those days and that kind of partnership because it's made all the difference to move things forward. I also just want to honor Marks and Spencer's and DFID this morning here as well, simply because they got on board in the last 2 years and have enabled us to go to a whole other level of scale. As you know, growing any organization is one thing to come up with the idea, one thing to get it going and everyone go like, yeah, this is great. Then you've got to make that big scale up jump and it's huge. They talk when you climb Mount Everest, what's it called, the Hillary step. It's a very short distance, but it's where most people give up. So we are hugely grateful for Marks and Spencer's and DFID for that partnership that have enabled us to see so much more happen in the last couple of years. And then I just want to thank you for coming this morning. You know, it's no mean thing to get yourself out of bed early in the morning to come to a breakfast that you've got no idea what it's about and sit in an oak paneled room sunk into the ground. But thank you, really appreciate you being there. On your table there are a few things. There's a copy of To Plant a Walnut Tree, which was just looking at the whole issue of what lies beyond leadership. So please accept that as my gift. You see in the middle of the table, and there's one for everybody there, an article that was we just published it this weekend in terms of coinciding with what's going on in New York right now with the launch of the new Sustainable Development Goals. So there's an article there that relates our work to what's going on the global scene as well right now. So just some bits for you to take home. Where I'd like to start this morning is briefly just give you a little bit of history about emerging leaders, but then get into the body of this morning, which is talking about leadership. I want to be able to give you something that is useful for the organizations that you work with. And then at the end of that, we'll leave some time for questions, and those questions can go pretty much where you want them to, as long as we stay within either leadership or emerging leaders. I'm not discussing Arsenal, Tottenham, or Manchester United. So where did we begin? So emerging leaders as an idea began 10 years ago. And I'd never even been to Africa until 10 years ago, and because of a project that my for-profit company sponsored at the time, building a school in Lusaka, I went out into the slums of Lusaka 10 years ago. And for me, it was a visceral shock, what I saw in front of me. At the time, I was training leaders in the corporate world, so I was seeing tens of thousands of pounds wasted on leadership development and literally going from there off the plane into the slums of Lusaka. And I was driven to find a way to answer this question: how could you bring the kind of leadership development that people are getting in the corporate world but not valuing very often? How could we get that into the slums and the villages and the townships where people are fighting to get through the day? The standard thing we talk about is how to live on $1 a day. It's actually $1.25 a day. And as Andrew Ruggiero said once, he said, have you tried living on $1.25 a day? So that's where we began the idea. For me, it was an issue of justice, as Nick said, that where you're born in the world should not determine your access to the best. And in this case, the best is the best leadership development that was going, because there is no sustainable change anywhere in any aspect of life without good leadership. For instance, when we brought leadership training into the Buganga Islands, where no one had ever taken leadership development before, it's in the middle of Lake Victoria, I saw more orphans wandering the streets than ever before or since. The donors had just come in and built 3 clean water wells on the island, and when I arrived, all 3 wells were broken. Not only did no one know how to fix them, they didn't really see it was their problem to fix them. So they were just back to taking water out of the lake and using the lake as drinking water and toilet. So it just underlined for me that everything stays in hopelessness unless there is good leadership. So what I did is I took timeless leadership principles that have been around for thousands of years, and I began to shape and package them together in a way that created some simple programs that could go into the slums, the villages, and the townships of sub-Saharan Africa. We ended up with one big program called Leadership for Hope. Out of that, we created another thing called Certificate in Community Leadership, and next year we launch a program for schools called Lead Now. Because one thing we have seen more and more is we have to get in there younger. Poverty is intergenerational, and we have to get this leadership training into the schools to break the cycles of poverty at a much, much younger age. So that will be launched next year. So what's been the impact of that training? Well, over 10 years, we've now been directly into 9 countries, including UK, which we started this year, with another 2 countries indirectly through our trained associates. A conservative estimate is we have now trained 23,000 people directly, and the indirect impact of that has been on 500,000 lives. After the training, people's lives change in every kind of way, and I'll talk more about that. Families change, incomes change, community security changes when people start to lead their lives. Now, you're very welcome to look at our impact data. I'm not going to spend hours going through it, but you are welcome to have a look at it. What I want to look at the moment is the Dandora slum. Now, the Dandora slum is in Nairobi. It is built on the city rubbish dump. You smell Dandora before you get there. And we started investing in Dandora in 2012 through our first pilot in Kenya. The reason for that is that the supply chains, whereby you go and get your vegetables and all the rest of it from Marks and Spencer's, place like that, employ out of places like Dandora. So one of the ways that we get our training into those kinds of communities is that's why we partner through the supply chain. So we made a first investment in 2012. We made a bigger investment in a group of youth from Dandora in 2013. And then we made an even bigger investment in 2014 where we were training hundreds of young people. We took 2 of them, we trained them to be facilitators in their local community and did mentoring with them. I just want to show you a snapshot. Steve took this 3 weeks ago, so it's very live in terms of what's the ongoing impact in Dandora. The guy who's narrating that in 2012 would tell you he was a self-confessed drug addict, unemployed, and now he is leading change, which has now been modeled by 50 other communities in the greater Dandora area. They did that. We didn't do that. They have led themselves. That's the kind of impact that we get to see. When we think about leadership, though, the key issue, as far as I'm concerned, is that the challenges of leadership are the same for the wealthy and the poor. That's what I've discovered. They're the same challenges around the same core leadership principles. Now, clearly the contexts are very different. You know, one is fighting to keep to budget and keep within minimum resource in their 9-foot by 9-foot shack. The other is fighting to keep within budget with minimum resource within their public or private sector business. But the challenges are the same. The key thing for us in what we do is that we don't train people about leadership. We train them to become leaders. Leaders of themselves, leaders of their relationships, leaders of their income, leaders of small businesses, leaders in their community. So I just want to spend some time sharing some things that I've learned. There are many, many things. I'd spend days saying, what have we learned in the last 10 years? Let me just share 5 things. The first thing that I want to talk about is that leading myself means to get power over my story. I'm going to explain that. Abraham Lincoln said this. He said, "The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew. We must act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country." Now you take what Lincoln has said and translate that to Wendy. Wendy is a lady who lives in a township on the edge of Cape Town called Mbakweni. She has 9 orphans sleep with her every night, and every single day she feeds 60 orphans off the street from her house, which is built of cardboard, corrugated iron, and blankets. And when she goes shopping, her neighbors come and steal her food and her belongings that she would want to give to the children. If Wendy were to rewrite Lincoln's words, I think she would say something like this: "The dogmas of my turbulent past are inadequate to my stormy present. My situation is piled high with difficulty, and I must rise with the occasion. As my case is new almost every day, I must think anew, and I must act anew. I must disenthrall myself, and then I shall save my family and my community." We have to think new thoughts, says Lincoln, if we are going to change anything. We have to. If I don't change, nothing out there will change. It's where leadership always begins. It's summed up perfectly by Salman Rushdie. "Those who do not have the power over the story that dominates their lives, power to retell it, rethink it, deconstruct it, and change it as times change, truly are powerless because they cannot think new thoughts." See, our lives are a real story. The lives of the rich and the lives of the poor, they're real stories being written every single day. And either we have power over that story, or that story has power over us. It's as true for Wendy as it is for the busy CEO, as the waiter or the plumber or the teacher or whoever is in this room. What is poverty? It's where someone else's story has got power over yours. If you take Oxfam's definition, the issue of poverty is more than an issue of money. It's a state of relative powerlessness in which people are denied the ability to control crucial aspects of their lives. That's how Oxfam's defining it. It means they've lost their sense of choice. They feel that someone else has got their pen to write their life story. What is ineffective leadership in any area of life? It's this: someone else has got power over your story. If we don't learn to think new thoughts, we will remain powerless. It's interesting, organizations are talking these days about how do we build a leadership culture in the organization. You've heard that? How do we build a leadership culture? Well, the issue is this: how do I build a leadership culture in my life? You see, if I don't have a leadership culture in my life, I will never create a leadership culture in my family, in my team at work, in my department, in my whole organization. It starts with me every time. I cannot lead anyone else unless I lead myself. Unless I'm developing a leadership culture in me day after day after day, it's not going to have an impact in developing a leadership culture in anyone else. Now, it's an easy checklist, actually, to be asking ourselves or anyone on your teams this morning, when you go back, Before we ask them, are you meeting your targets? Are you hitting deadlines? We should be asking them this. Do you have a personal mission statement for your life? Like, what? I've talked with chief execs about this. I say, how important is it for your business to have a clear mission statement? They said, well, it's totally, 100% crucial. So I would then ask them, so do you have one for your life? If it's that important a principle of leadership, everyone should have one, shouldn't they? And if you don't have one, how do you know how to develop a mission statement for anyone else if you've not lived that out for yourself? Another question that you could ask someone on your team, do you have a personal vision for your life that shapes every day that you live? Do you have an explicit, and I use the word explicit because everyone I've talked to in the coaching, when you're coaching, they say, oh yeah, of course I got values. You say, well, what are they? Well, I need to, but I do. I'd say you need to have an explicit set of values that shape the decisions that you make every day. What is the story you are trying to write with your life? What are your personal strategic goals? What are you focused on in your life? What steps are you taking in your life today to get you from where you are to where you want to be? Now, if the answer to these questions that you either ask yourself or people on your team is no, I don't have an answer to those questions, then we are not developing a leadership culture in ourselves. Because this is bread and butter leadership. If we are not leading ourselves, we will not develop a leadership culture anywhere, in any organization, whether it's rich or poor. And what happens? What happens is this: we end up managing our lives, not leading them. We end up managing our workloads, not leading them. It's the same message for the poorest. Before we start running clean water projects, new education projects, youth empowerment projects, income generating projects, we have to invest in them first, that they become leaders. There's the article on the middle of the table there is trying to look at that around the Sustainable Development Goals. So please do take that away and read it. We worked with World Vision in Kenya. And when I met Dickens after the training, or a month or so afterwards, he said, I have seen more change in my projects across Kenya in 1 month than I have seen in 5 years. His words, not mine. Now, why is that? The difference is, he said, everyone's looking at leading themselves now. They're not sitting around waiting for them. Because everyone's waiting for them. They're now saying, I am them. It starts with me. Now they can start and are running the projects around clean water, health, education, whatever it may be. And leadership change always starts with mindset change. Our thinking controls who we are. So much about leadership is learning to think differently. That's why you can teach it anywhere, because you can teach people how to think differently. A good example is we came across this lady who the donor world sweeps through and offers the community all kinds of opportunities. First opportunity they offered was an income generating project through beekeeping. And she put her hand up, yeah, I'll do that, I'll do that. She grabs the money, grabs the opportunity. Then the donors came through and offered a microfinance project. Oh, I'll do that, I'll do that. Then they came through with a fish farming project. I'll do that, I'll do that. Then they came through with a bread making project. I'll do that. And she signed up for every single project was going, and none of them lasted. None of them lasted. And it became a bit of a joke, really, that she'd put her hand up, but everyone knew they'd fail. And it was always everyone else's fault that they failed, of course. They failed because when she hit the difficult places, she didn't know what to do. And difficulties come. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor. You hit difficulties. If you are not equipped in here with a personal leadership culture, when you hit the difficulty, you'll do what she did. You'll just drop it and say it's their fault. And that's what happens. She did not know how to lead herself through these difficult places. If you contrast that with Sienna, who went through the training, did the Leadership for Hope course, went back and bought some chickens to start an income generating project. All her chickens died. That's a heart sink moment when you put all your money into buying chickens to raise your income. They all died. She scratched around, found some more money, bought more chickens, and guess what? They all died. Now, most people would give up at that point, but Sienna dug into the training that she'd had. She said, no, I'm going to lead myself through this. This feels impossible, but there is a way, and I'll find it. I'm going to lead myself through this. So she started applying all the principles that she learned. She got help, she got advice, she applied it. She rigidly got herself through it and got that project working and creating income. Why? Because she led herself. It's interesting as well for me in the corporate world that so much is beginning to be talked about the issue of mindfulness. Are you hearing that in your organizations? We should be focusing on mindfulness. You know, mindfulness is just another word for leadership. That's all it is. It's just another word. See, mindfulness simply means who controls my thinking. That's what mindfulness is. Mindfulness means I lead my thinking. I don't let my thinking lead me. The issue of my leadership should be judged on what I do at 3 o'clock in the morning when I wake up with my head full of so many impossibilities that I don't even know what to do with them. Do I lead my thinking at 3 a.m. or does my thinking, well, it doesn't lead me, it runs me ragged. That's what happens if we let our thinking lead us. If I don't get power over the story will get power over me. What's the second lesson I want to just look at here? Leadership potential needs calling out. As we said, organizations have begun to see the need to liberate leadership potential of everyone on their staff. It's the same issue for the poorest communities in the world. How do we liberate the leadership potential of the poorest communities in the world so that they are all leading their lives, not sitting around waiting? How do we liberate the potential within people to be proactive, to be problem solvers, to be long-term thinkers, to see and take responsibility for issues that are going around them, to change what isn't working, to get focused, to develop a positive attitude, to feel, see, and think like leaders do, to be financially literate and responsible, to develop an interdependent attitude and a trustworthy character. Now, the issues I've had to wrestle with from day one of emerging leaders is how do you begin to even begin to get someone to start looking at how to deal with some of these issues in themselves when they are locked in intergenerational hopelessness? How do you even get them to begin? And latest research shows that if you are just born into one of these communities, slum, township, your IQ is reduced by 13 points. It's not that you're stupid, just by being born there and in that context reduces your IQ by 13 points, shuts down your ability to problem solve, creative thinking, and look long term. So they're starting on their back foot. How do you even begin to get them to liberate their leadership potential? How do we begin that journey? Has been probably one of the biggest things I am constantly wrestling with. Well, it starts first of all with the leader's beliefs. What do I believe? What do I or you as a leader, as a team leader, as a department leader, as an organization, what do you believe about people? That's where it begins. You see, that's what's going to shape the outcome for everybody in your team, in your department, in your division, in your organization, in your slum, in your township. You see, if in our relationships I believe that the person in front of me is inferior, an educational failure, a hopeless case, stupid, not creative, can't solve problems, if that's what I believe about them, then that's the outcome I'll get. My belief about them shapes outcomes. You know, when I'm training in Africa, if I do not believe that I have another Nelson Mandela sitting right in front of me, or another Wangari Maathai sitting right in front of me, I won't find them. But I do believe it, and I'm always looking for them. You see, often leadership programs teach us knowledge about leadership. But my question is, what do you believe about leadership? Not what do you know, what do you believe? What shapes my choices moment by moment? Pressure does that, doesn't it? Pressure forces you to work out, what do you believe? Not what do you know, but what do you really believe? Let me tell you 4 things I'm convinced about. I believe these things. I am convinced that every human being on this planet is a leader at some level of their life. Every single one. That's what I believe. It's in them. Everyone can develop a leadership culture in them and around them. It needs to be drawn out. Second thing I believe in principles of leadership. I believe there are timeless principles out there that if you can just simplify them and get them out there, transform lives. I believe that. The first day I delivered anything into the slums of Lusaka, I put my whole body weight on that belief. And it worked. Third thing I believe is I believe in human potential. I don't believe any of us are anywhere close to maximizing the potential that lies within us. Even in this room, I don't think we're anywhere close to maximizing the potential that is within us. And the fourth thing is I believe in justice. I really believe in justice. I believe that where you're born in the world should not determine your access to the very best. I believe that Wendy in Mbakweni deserves the same quality leadership investment as I've given to investment bankers and lawyers. If I didn't believe these things, I couldn't do the work that we do. You just wouldn't bother. So we've just come back out of South Africa. The last thing that I did is I taught a Leadership for Life program, which is a half-day envisioning program, to youth in a township called Elsis River. Now, as I'm standing with all these young people in front of me, some of them with drug-shot eyes, there are some things I know about these young people when I'm looking out at them. Number one is I know their community is run by the gangs, not by the local councillors. Number two, I know that if they go to prison, 83% of them are going to reoffend. I know as I look out there that 80% of them are unemployed, and that 90% of them are involved in drugs by the time they either complete school or more likely drop out of school. Now that tests what you believe. To stand in front of that, and that's not an isolated story. This is the story of the townships of South Africa right now. It's a desperate story. I don't have time to tell you about the devastation of the drug tick. God forbid that that takes hold in this country. It is destroying, and I'm not exaggerating, the minds of a generation of South African youth. Every business and every industry face huge impossibilities. And it's the wrestle with these impossibilities that force you to work out, what do you believe? What do you believe about people? What do you believe about transformation? Now, your beliefs then lead you to the next thing, which is to call people out. I want to recover that word vocation. It's come back to me more in the last 12 months than ever. The word vocation literally means to call. I think it's one of the things we've lost sight of in the world of leadership and leadership development. You see, it is not the destiny of a young person to become a tick addict. It is not their destiny. It is not their destiny to be unemployed with HIV/AIDS. It is not their destiny in this country to end up being called what's one of the NEET group. It is not their destiny to end up in prison. I don't believe that they were born onto planet Earth to end up in any of those places. But they have. Now, I believe I was very fortunate as an older teenager to have two significant leadership mentors in my life who called me. They called me out into leadership. And it's the job of the leader to call to the people around them, to call out to them, not to stay silent, not to be so busy doing really important things that we do not spend time calling out to the people around us. Now, what are we calling? What is it that leaders call out? You have potential. That's what they call. It's in you, it's in you. It's not out there somewhere, it's in you. You can do this. I see your greatness. Your life does have a meaning and a purpose to it. Let's help you find it. You can face your poverty mindsets. You can learn new mindsets. You can lead your life from where it is to where you want it to be. You can positively impact the lives of people around you. You can shape your character. You can pick up the pen to write your own life story. You've got a story to write. That's what I mean by calling. What am I calling to? I am calling to something in them that is alive but sleeping. It's dormant. It's like a seed full of potential in someone, but it's dormant. It's all there. And the leader's job is to call to that dormant seed. And what happens is that the call finds an echo inside of that person. See, when a life is dormant, it's asleep. It can't say to itself, hey, I'm a leader, because it's asleep. But when someone calls to them, it finds an echo within them, and the echo is the person kind of going, whoa, this is me, this is me. Which means that they start waking up. Napoleon said that a leader is a dealer in hope. You know, that's the root word of prosperity. Prosperity is not about making money. It's a whole other talk there. Prosperity is actually about creating hope in the lives of people. That's what Napoleon said. A leader is a dealer in hope. One of the key things about being a dealer in hope is waking people up. Leadership potential is not dead in people's lives, it's just dormant. Now, I think one of the reasons why it wakes them up is that it's a new and strange voice in their heads. You see, you are useless. You won't amount to anything. You know, in the UK, the NEET group are called, you're a member of the lost generation. People are being told that the leader is the person in the role of leadership, and few will attain that. Business schools have turned leadership into the domain of the 0.1% brightest people on planet Earth. Which means if you grow up in Malawi right now, you don't stand a chance, because only 56 out of 100,000 people in Malawi ever go on to higher education. They're the familiar voices. They're the voices everyone knows. They're the voices that have allowed everyone to go to sleep. Those voices of you don't have any potential. Don't even bother waking up. They're familiar voices, but this new voice calling out to them is the different voice. And the reason why it's different, I think, is they're actually beginning to hear their own voice for the first time. That voice that was in them but has gone to sleep. They're beginning to hear their own voice now. It's waking up, and they are recognizing the truth about themselves. Which leads to the last thing. They can now start calling to themselves. Now you've got shift. Now you've got shift. When people have woken up, and because someone called to them, and they are now able to call to themselves, hey, I have amazing potential. I have my pen. I can do this. The joy that Jane and I get when we go back and visited places we've trained, we don't even recognize half the people we train, except that they rush up to us with their, whoops, that didn't go very well. They rush up to us with a pen. They say, I've got my pen, I've got my pen. What they're saying is, I'm leading my life, I'm leading my life. I've got power over my story right now. That's the first thing they will tell us. Because they've woken up and they're now telling themselves, because we called to them, they can now call to themselves. Once people wake up, once people start calling to themselves, then the potential is there to put in much more investment around skills development and entrepreneurial skills and all the other stuff. You know, when you ask any group, and we've done this with the corporates, what are the characteristics of a leader? I guarantee there's one word that always appears in the list, and it's the word inspiring. Now, inspiring simply means to breathe life into someone. That's what it means. Leaders are people who breathe life into others. We, all of us, cannot abdicate the responsibility that we have to breathe life into others, to call out to them, to become their biggest self. So my question to you, as I put it to myself, is what do you believe about people? And are you calling to your staff today? Are you calling them out? Let me just quickly touch on another couple of things. Third lesson, make the right investment and trust in the outcome. You know, empowerment is a very well used word these days, and my definition of empowerment would be simply the heading: make the right investment and then trust the outcome. Because the reverse of that is we spend all the time trying to control the outcome because we never invested in our staff. Now, the biggest conversation I have with the donor world, so forgive me for those from the donor world this morning, is around the outcomes of our work. Because they are so used to pigeonholing outcomes. They want to know about the outcomes of our work. Is it health? Is it HIV? Is it education? Is it livelihoods? Is it sanitation? Is it productivity in the supply chain? Is it gender equality? And of course, the answer from our point of view, it's all those things and more. You see, when you liberate the leadership potential of an individual, they begin to change everything. Because their whole worldviews now change. They see themselves as the leader. So suddenly, everything in their lives and around their lives is their responsibility to do something about. So everything begins to change. You see, in their eyes, it's just one thing. It's a whole. I'm changing, so let's change things. Whatever I see needs changing, let's change it. So we don't tell people what to do with our training. We just invest hard. Whether it's for 3 days on the Leadership for Hope program or 4 half days on the Certificate in Community Leadership program, and then trust the outcome. We call out to them, we fight for them, we invest the best leadership principles we can come across in them, and we talk incessantly with them how these principles apply to every aspect of their lives and communities. And then we let the river cut its own course. With support, yes, but direction, no. Incomes in central Kenya, when we worked with the tea part of the supply chain, went up by 43%. And family savings went up by 161% when people started leading their own lives. The impact was so great, it was reported back to us by a third party that the banks were complaining. The unemployed have got jobs. Families that haven't spoken for 10 years are hanging out with each other now. Drink and drug youth have started their own businesses. Lives have literally been saved. Schools have been started. Men are transforming the way that they treat their wives and their children. Kids are being fed. Forests are being planted. We didn't tell anyone to do that stuff. They just do it because they're now leading themselves. And I could go on. I've watched nearly 10 years of this. And the outcomes all fit the classic 3 categories that you should be looking for, which are around safety in the community, well-being in the community, and livelihoods. So they fit all those categories, but in truth, the stories are as rich and as diverse as you can imagine. But what did I learn? Make the right investment. Give people the best leadership, and then trust in their potential to deliver the outcomes. I'm just going to deal with one more. Have a stranglehold on your mission, and then just keep on pushing through the chaos. Have a stranglehold on your mission, and then just keep on pushing through the chaos. I always knew why emerging leaders existed. That was never fluffy. It was always crystal clear. It remains crystal clear. The mission of emerging leaders was never complicated and never in doubt. We wanted to bring tangible hope through getting world-class leadership development into vulnerable grassroots communities. In the early days when we were traveling and someone on our team would say, well, why don't we do the training here? I would say something like this: no, we're not off the road yet. And that was my kind of shorthand for saying, look, the road is where stuff happens. Let's get off the road. Let's get to where it's not happening. Let's get out into the edge of that slum, that village, that township, where it isn't getting to. So the mission was clear. The core values around injustice were very clear, but not much else was. To be honest, we have been opportunistic much of the time. When we started, we didn't have a 10-year plan. It was like 5 years before we got a 10-year plan. When we started working with Marks & Spencer's and Diffit in the agricultural supply chain 2 years ago, as one of our 4 entry points into vulnerable communities, we did not have a well laid out plan. I could not have told you in 2012, 2013, the amazing stuff that's happened and is happening. And it's just growing. Now, I would like to have said, oh, we sat down in 2012 and we said it's going to this and that and that. You know, I didn't know we would have prisoners in South African prisons who want to be trained as trainers because they're life prisoners and they want to invest back into the other prisoners. I couldn't have told you that in 2012. There is so much that we do not know. Tom Peters wrote that iconic book, Thriving on Chaos, and he said, you know, if you want to make it in the next century, and that's the one we're in right now, this one, he said that a leader is someone who needs to thrive, not survive, thrive on chaos. It's exactly the same thought that Jim Collins had in Good to Great, that you have to have a ruthless hold on your core, like your life depended on it, and then you just push into the mess and keep going. I always, on a bad day, remember Winston Churchill. He said, when you find yourself in hell, just keep walking. All right? We have had some bad days. And all I had to just say is, Trevor, all you need to do today is put one step in front of the next. You know, so much of leadership, we get caught up in thinking we should know. There should be no mess and chaos. Actually, I think one of the great intangible abilities of leadership is the ability to not know. Now, I'm not talking about ignorance, lack of preparation, and stupidity. There's no excuse for that. I'm saying there's so much in leadership that what you confront at the coalface, you say, with all the best intelligence, learning, and research I've got, I don't know what to do now. And you're like, but I'm paid to know what to do. Actually, it's not how it works. You know, the first time we, and Hazel will remember this because she was up there with us, first time we went into South Africa, we were in and out in 5 days. And in 5 days, I had to speak at a Marks & Spencer's conference, go and visit a township in South Africa the first time. I'd never been to South Africa. And then deliver the 3-day Leadership for Hope into the farm workers. And farm workers are often migrant farm workers who cross the whole country from east to west just to get some work, picking fruit or whatever it may be. I could show you the film, but we don't have time. As we drove out of Cape Town, I'm thinking, this is not Africa. This is San Francisco. If you've been to South Africa, Cape Town, it's first world. The infrastructure's first world. And the people were with like, yeah, but when we go to the townships, you'll see it. And they took us to the townships the next time. I'm going like, this? Like, I've just literally zipped out of Kenya, where people have no idea where the local toilet is. His toilet is a plastic bag in a ditch that is got leaking water that's polluted. And these townships I went to had toilets. And I discovered that even the agricultural supply farm workers earn 4 times more, with a cost of living that is 50% of that of Kenya. So I'm confronted with all these things, and I'm thinking, why are we here? And everyone's saying, you haven't got it yet, you haven't got it yet. Now, here's the difficulty, is I have taught Leadership for Hope in 7 other sub-Saharan African countries, lots of times. So there's a bit in me that goes like, well, I know. You know, I know the material, I know Africa, And suddenly, I'm confronted with, oh my goodness, I don't know. I have no idea. And I've got this panic growing in me, which doesn't go away. I arrive at day 1 of the 3-day Leadership for Hope, and we arrive there, and the farm workers are sitting out on the steps already early in the morning, singing. It was haunting. Their singing is beautiful. But if you listen to the way they were singing, it was the song of broken hearts, deep sadness. And we're like, what is going on here? I just didn't know what to do, and I'm thinking, what we've done up to, it's not going to work, it's not going to work. And I just sat with it. I thought, the only way I can hear this is to disenthrall myself with everything I've known so far and just listen. And I just sat and listened to it, to just let myself hear. And with 10 minutes to go before 9 o'clock, it suddenly occurred to me. Some stuff I'd been working on in the previous month that I'd never ever tried out, I just suddenly said to Jane, we've got to start in a different place. This has to begin in a different place. Jane, who's an amazing artist, started doing drawings. I banged out a couple of slides, and boom, 9 o'clock we're underway. And I began by teaching them that the problem of your potential is that when poverty gets from the belly into the head, it creates poverty mindsets, and that's what keeps you small. So regardless of how much money you have or don't have, that's what keeps you small. I remember a few months later, I met with Nick for lunch when we were back in England for 2 minutes, and I showed him the poverty mindsets. He said, I want these for the city. And that's the truth. The principle's a principle. Poverty mindset. Anyway, we taught that stuff, and they totally engaged. We had a brilliant 3 days, and we have taught poverty mindsets in every single program for the last 2 years since, and it's transformed. It's taken what we did, which was good, to a whole other level. My point is this. It all came out of chaos. It all came out of not knowing. It all came out of being willing to sit with not knowing while holding on to that sense of mission. Let me finish with a quote from the late Anita Roddick, who, respect to that lady. She said, this is no dress rehearsal. For anyone in this room, anywhere in the city of London today, anywhere in the township of Mbakweni, anyone in the slum of Dandora, anyone in Kia Minor, anyone with only one arm or one leg on the streets of Sierra Leone where we've worked. This is no dress rehearsal. You only have one life. So lead your life, she said. Not live it. Lead your life and try and be extraordinary. Amen, Anita. Thank you very much. Let's take some questions about leadership or about the work that Emerging Leaders does.
From all the projects that you've done and the people you've met and unlocked their potential,
Yes.
Is there a particular type of person or a particular experience that you think holds people back, or that's been typical of people who it's been the biggest challenge with?
Yeah, I think everywhere's challenging in a different way. So as I tried to explain, South Africa was challenging in a whole other way. From our point of view, they're a lot better off, all right? Now, from their point of view, they're not. To me, the commonality is poverty mindset. So we teach 7 poverty mindsets. There are 7 different ways that poverty gets from the belly into the head. And actually, they're in all of our heads in this room. That's what keeps people small. That's why you have to shift mindsets first. If you don't shift mindsets, nothing else will happen. Yes, and then yes.
I was curious about what you said that you've done leadership training in corporates.
Yes.
You've essentially taken that body of work out into the communities that you've taken them out to. What are some of the tweaks that you've had to make culturally in order to?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I just wondered what the.
Man, I made some mistakes in the early days. So the things I've taken out are simply the principles. That's what I had to work hard. What's a principle and what's just a kind of cultural nice to have? And the way to do that is to dig over thousands of years. You know, what were the Chinese saying in X BC about leadership? And try and look, where are the principles? And try and discern the principles. Because if my view was, if it's really a principle, then it will work for someone who's not earning more than $1 a day. It will work. So find the principles was the first thing. So it's pulling out all those principles was the first thing. And then it's learning the culture. That's the thing is always when you go into somewhere new is learn. So what are the issues here? Now, there's a massive issue around alcohol and drug addiction in Kenya. And there's a massive issue around alcohol and drug addiction in South Africa. But they're also different. So it's trying to learn the nuances. So typically and this is a generalization, so forgive me, typically in East Africa, you'll see it's the men who take the money and get drunk. Well, in South Africa, they have the highest fetal alcohol syndrome in the world by a magnitude of 40%. So you've got all the incidences of fetal alcohol syndrome, ... Then you get to South Africa and the graph goes whoop. Now, fetal alcohol syndrome can only come because the mothers are alcoholics. I met one of our guys in the epicenter of the South African epidemic, and I was meeting him in a park, a car park, at 7 o'clock in the morning, and at 7 o'clock in the morning, the women were queuing outside the liquor store. So you've got to learn cultures. You know, when I remember in the early days, I was in the middle of nowhere in Uganda, and I used an illustration where I used the S word, Starbucks. I mean, how stupid is that? You know, at that point there was no Starbucks in Uganda. Most of the people never even been in a coffee shop, so you know it was stupid. So you just make the mistake once and learn fast. But the other thing is just do lots of homework. Yes.
Yeah, I'm interested, Trevor, in the kind of entry journey prior to you going in to do a piece of leadership work, because that can really precondition the feeling in the room with the people. So is it that communities come and ask for you, or is it partners who come and say, I'd like you to work with my partner community? Or, I mean, I have no idea what it is.
The answer is multiple. So we have 4 entries into communities. So one is through the agricultural supply chain. Sub-Saharan Africa, 64% of the continent is involved in agriculture. So we've learned that if you want to get into the grassroots, the agricultural supply chain is a brilliant way of doing it. So how would we get into that? Well, we'll get in through the organizations that are part of that chain in the agricultural supply chain. So we went into Kenya because a company called VegPro that pick and pack fresh produce that you will see on the shelves of Marks and Spencer's, they invited us to come in and bring the training. It could be, as the work has grown, it might be that Marks and Spencer say to us, hey, look, there's an opportunity over here with this supplier, and you know there's a whole issue around trafficking on that particular bit of the continent, and could you bring the training there? So that's what I mean by opportunistic. As far as, if you know what your mission is, as long as we're getting into the right communities, we kind of don't really care how we get there. So supply chain, direct through the communities. So World Vision would be an example of that. So we were talking with World Vision about us being the program in front of their programs. What they did then is brought their heads of communities from the whole country, and I trained them all. And then we came back 3 months later and trained 90 of them to be trainers to go back into their communities. So totally through partnership with World Vision in that instance. We've got into the prisons of South Africa because we were invited to go and present to prisoners by the prison authorities. Schools, we are utterly reliant on head teachers. You know, the program that we're creating to go into schools will be taught by teachers, not by us. The only way the teachers are going to be able to teach it is if the head teachers totally buy into it. So they're a key partner. So then it's, well, who is the person that kind of has some control over the head teachers? So we can get the head teachers in one room. So that's what we're thinking about all the time. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I have a supplementary if I'm allowed.
Yes, sure.
So what is it, how do you help set the expectations of the people in the room before they get there, or do they just kind of rock up?
Often they just get there. Our experience is that however much work you do beforehand, they'll still turn up. I mean, Steve had this even in the UK, running a program 3 weeks ago. Loads of work in preparation and all the rest of it. They still turn up and say, why are we here? Why are we here? A lot of people have no idea why we're here. So we try and set the expectation right at the beginning. I mean, on Leadership for Hope, I just say, look, by the end of 3 days, I'm going to ask you to do 3 things. Number 1 is share everything you've learned with at least 20 other people within 1 month. Number 2 is set up and lead a project that will benefit your community. And number 3 is set up and lead an income-generating project. Let's go. You know, by the end of 3 days, you'll know how to do that. And that's what we work towards. Another question, and then I think we should stop. Yes?
It's a really inspiring talk, and you're obviously yourself really personally invested in emerging leaders.
Yes.
How big can emerging leaders get?
Global.
Can it only get as big as...
No. The issue is, and I suppose some of it's in the book, if you see the organization in terms of yourself, then it can get... And part of that's how do you get out your own way. I mean, to start with, it was just me. Literally, just me. And you can do that so far, and then you reach this kind of barrier. It's like, okay, well, we now need this. And so that's how it's gone all the time. The M&S funding, the DFID funding has helped us to then create a really good train-the-trainer model, which we're now able to scale out. But even that's come to its capacity now. We now need more people that can go and run train-the-trainer courses. So that's what we're investing in now. So you're kind of pushing the thing out all the time. I'm trying to build an organization that will continue after I'm dead, basically. And I'm building with that in mind. I'm building every day thinking this needs to outlast me. Because the mission is global. You find me a vulnerable community, then we should be there. Will we get there? You know, I'm 58. Will we get there in my lifetime? Chances are not. So let's leave an organization that will keep on doing that. And it's never not going to be needed, is it? I mean, the population is what, it's 7.2 billion right now. It's going to be 9 billion by 2050. So we're never going to run out of opportunity. But it's for everyone. And when everyone gets this training, they all say the same thing. Why did you take so long? Why didn't I hear this before? Why have I only just heard? And we've had like 80-year-olds sitting there going, why didn't you come before? Yeah. So it's for anyone, any age, because it is just about liberating your leadership potential. Thank you very much for getting up early and getting here, for being very patient. And we ask that the food will still be there so you can still drink coffee and eat croissants. Do leave the name badges with us because then we can recycle the whole thing. So that would be great. Do hang around if you want to hang around. We're hanging around. But if you need to go, have a great day. Thank you very much.